Hello, welcome to the Mindfulbellie YouTube channel. I'm Ellie, your health and emotional eating coach. The purpose of this channel is to teach you tools to break through sugar addiction, binge eating, and really transform your relationship with food. Today I'm going to share with you one way you can overcome overeating. This is something I really struggled with. I was constantly overeating. I didn't know why I felt hungry all the time. I felt like I could feel physically full, but never mentally satiated. And I would go day after day just overeating to the point where I was miserable. I would feel sluggish, lethargic, want to just go lie in bed, not do anything, but I kept eating. And then I'd promise myself, I'm not gonna do this again, and then the next day it would happen. And it was so toxic. I felt so much shame around it, and I didn't realize it was the foods that were driving a lot of this. So I want to explain to you today why that may be happening for you and how to overcome it. Number one, hyperpalatable foods and hormone dysregulation. So we'll start with the hyperpalatable foods. So when we're eating foods that are refined sugars, refined carbs, things like chips, things like processed cookies, these foods are super stimulating to our taste buds. They promote a dopamine response. Dopamine is our neurotransmitter directly related to pleasure and reward centers in our brain. So we eat a bite and we instantly want a next bite. We get these huge surges of dopamine that is basically like that itch for the next thing. So dopamine's involved in gambling, in cocaine, heroin, and sugar, and processed foods. So these foods are chemically designed to keep us overeating. So if you're eating foods that are highly processed, this is one huge reason that you may be over-consuming and just not being able to actually feel full. These foods override our ability to tune into our fullness signals. So first thing is to look at what you're eating and start weaning off of these processed foods. And I call them foods with no breaks. So there may be certain trigger foods for you that you specifically know that you start eating them and you feel like you quite literally can't stop. So identify what those are. Write them down, get them out of the house, and remove that temptation from yourself. Or if you are going to eat those foods, take caution. Pause, really portion them out, put the rest away, and be really mindful when you do eat those foods. All right, the other part of this is when we're eating a lot of hyperpalatable processed food, it disrupts our hormone regulation. So when we eat things like refined carbs, sugar, anything that's going to spike our blood sugar, we spike our insulin. Insulin is our fat storage hormone. So insulin comes out, its responsibility is to get our blood sugar back down. But what happens is when we're constantly eating carbs all the time and spiking our blood sugar, we get these chronically high levels of insulin. Well, when insulin is high, it tells our body to not touch our fat stores for energy. So between meals, when you should be able to go like 4 to 6 hours, if your insulin is high, your body's not able to tap into your fat stores for energy. So your cells literally start to starve and you start craving food. You're hungry. You're feeling hungry all the time between meals. And so then what are we reaching for? Probably more carbs and sugar because those things are addicting and maybe craving them and if you have a blood sugar spike, have a blood sugar crash and then craving those things. So then reaching for those things, increasing your insulin again, and then keeping that pattern going. So we're eating carbs and sugar all the time, having high insulin circulating in the blood, unable to tap into our fat stores, so we literally feel hungry all the time. The other part of this is that when insulin is high, we lose our ability to feel satiated. So we have another hormone called leptin. Leptin is our satiety hormone. So when you eat a meal, in a healthy individual, you eat a meal, your leptin goes up, and the leptin signal goes to the brain, and the brain sees it and says, okay, we're full. Let's turn off the hunger hormones and rev up your metabolism so that you go burn through this energy. Then between meals, you're burning through that fat, and then leptin signal falls, and your brain's like, okay, leptin, I don't see you, so we're hungry, or we need energy. Let's rev up your hunger hormones so that you go find food, and we'll slow down your metabolism to conserve energy. Well then, you go eat again, your leptin level goes up, brain's like, I'm full, and that pattern continues. However, if you are eating a bunch of refined carbs and these processed foods all the time, and you have these chronically high insulin levels, leptin may be high, you may have just eaten, but your brain doesn't see that. Insulin blocks that leptin signal. So your brain's like, where's the food? We're hungry. Keeps your hunger hormones high, keeps your metabolism slow. And then we're just constantly reaching for food. Maybe you just ate, but you get home and you're looking in the pantry for things And even though you know you've eaten so many calories, your brain is still hungry. This is where when people, you may have heard like, oh, just eat intuitively. Like when your hormones are messed up, you cannot tap into your own intuition. I know this for myself. I never felt physically full. I never felt mentally satiated from food until I switched my diet. And so I just invite you to start really paying attention to your blood sugar to get the insulin down. And that's why so many people with diabetes, with insulin resistance, do really well on a keto diet or a low carb diet because they're getting that insulin down. And I don't want to demonize carbohydrates. Everyone has a tolerance to carbohydrates. So it just depends on where you're at. If you're insulin resistant, if you're diabetic, then your tolerance is much lower than someone who's metabolically healthy. So what can be really helpful is starting to track, just even for a day or a week, how much sugar and refined carbs are you consuming? And get very clear, because sugar sneaks in everywhere. Sauces, drinks, things that seem so healthy are often filled with sugar. And then on top of that, things that may seem healthy to you, like whole wheat bread, low-fat yogurts, spiking your blood sugar just like a Coke. And so another tool that can be super helpful is to get a continuous glucose monitor. You can get one from places like NutriSense. They do a 2-week trial, and you can put it on your arm. It's basically just measuring your blood sugar in real time, and you can watch how foods affect your blood sugar. It is so eye-opening, and you'll realize that a lot of things that you may think are healthy are actually putting you in this fat storage mode, making you hungry all the time, and craving more sugar and carbs. And then also eat real food. Focus on what you get to eat, what to add in. So if you are eating carbs, add in protein with it, help balance that blood sugar. And also adding in fiber. So if you can think of the difference between a glass of orange juice and 6 oranges, a glass of orange juice, all the fiber is stripped out and that sugar is concentrated. So a glass of orange juice has pretty much the same amount of sugar as a Coke. Whereas 6 oranges, when you eat them, you feel that fullness because there is the fiber to fill you up. So to start paying attention to that, if you are eating real food, whole fruit, and then focusing on building your plate, adding in the protein and the healthy fat. So I want to drive the point that healthy fats do not make you fat, that we need energy, and our energy sources are either from carbohydrates or fat. So if you go on a low carb protocol, then we do need fat for energy, for fuel. And fat is a very long burning fuel. So you get satiated, it makes you feel very satiated and have sustainable energy throughout the day versus highs and lows of a blood sugar roller coaster if you're being fueled strictly by carbohydrates. So real quick recap, we want to get insulin down. How do we do that? Eat real food. Meat, fish, eggs, vegetables, whole fruit, nuts and seeds if you tolerate them, and start tracking your sugar and carb intake. Another tip is to use a continuous glucose monitor and see how foods are affecting you. And subscribe to the channel if you're looking for more tips to overcome overeating and step into your healthiest self.